Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from Visibility, a company committed to helping pharmaceutical companies build and implement visible strategies. My name is Alan Mackintosh. I'm the founder of Team Development Specialists Partners Team Development, and I'm delighted to host today's event. I'm joined today by Mark Bradley, the Chief Executive and founder of PeopleWith, who will introduce you to the value created for companies by accessing patient-generated healthcare data. Thank you all for attending this webinar. I see there's a number of people still logging in. However, in the interest of time, we'll just kick off. For those of you who can't stay with us for the whole of the 30 to 40-minute session, a recording of this session will be made available to all registered delegates. Just to let you know, due to GDPR, we will not be highlighting any of the delegate names throughout this session. If you have questions whilst Mark is presenting, please use the chat function to present these throughout the programme, and I will present them to Mark either during his presentation or at the session at the end. But before we start, a little information about Mark, the founder of PeopleWith. Mark's worked in healthcare for over 30 years. He started his career as a registered nurse within the NHS before moving into a number of roles within the pharmaceutical industry. Those roles within the NHS and within pharma have afforded him an excellent schooling in the needs of patients, healthcare providers, and the pharmaceutical industry itself. He brings a real wealth of experience to this webinar today. So, Mark, without further ado, over to you. I'm looking forward to this, particularly given my experience in healthcare, and I'm very keen to hear how patient-generated healthcare data can, if used properly, help companies to make game-changing, informed strategic decisions. So, Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Alan, for them kind words. Everybody, you're very welcome to this session today. I'm just going to share my screen if that's all right, Alan. And if you have any questions, I'll be seeing my screen. I won't actually see you. So maybe just if you want to just butt in, I'll then be aware that you're looking to ask a question. All right?
Okay, that's fine.
We'll share the screen here first. Can you see my screen all right, Alan?
Yes, all coming across very clear.
Okay, so guys, this is all about including patients across all phases of a brand's life cycle, but today's focus is maybe highlighting how we can optimize patient centricity, but especially in the clinical trial ecosystem. And PeopleWith is all about knowing your patient, their journey and the progression of health, and being able to access that in real time through patient-generated healthcare data. And whenever you are accessing the right levels of patient-generated health data, and especially across sites, you can make better informed decisions as into the site selection for either clinical trials or real-world evidence creation. But whenever you're looking to do this, it's how do you optimize the patient recruitment for clinical trials? And today's all about building this out properly in order to make an access to knowledge that enables you to make informed decisions faster. Patient-generated health data. So if we look to the world of consumers, knowing what is happening with the consumer of a brand is something that's evident across every single industry. Like if you go into a shop and buy a bar of chocolate, or if you're buying a new technology like a television or whatever the case may be, these brand owners are always tracking and capturing intelligence as into your experiences with their brands. This is no different in the healthcare industry, albeit we're probably not as good as some of the other industries in being able to access it. Patient-generated healthcare data is health-related data that's created or recorded or gathered directly from the patients. And in some cases, for some conditions, it may require the involvement of either a family member or a carer to reflect that progress. This is totally distinct from data that's generated in clinical settings. If you talk about data in clinical settings, you're talking about electronic health records or primary records that's held in clinical environments. But being able to access patient-generated health data better gives you a real-time reflection, granular reflection of the progression of health. And we've got to realize that with the digital technologies that are at our disposal now, there's a growing use of home devices and wearables by patients. Like there's a lot of homes now that have blood pressure monitors, or they have devices that enables them to monitor the progression of their condition. But we just have to make people aware that even with smart devices now, like your mobile phone or your smart technology, like your tablets, on average per day, there's 1,400 interactions with these devices per user that can be health related. And the trajectory of these interactions is increasing significantly. And they're forecasting by the end of 2025 that this will rise to approximately 5,000 interactions, which will all add to the granularity about the health progress from patients. With respect to PeopleWith, it's patient-generated health data that will inform strategies across the lifespan of the brand. But today's focus is all going to be around the trial design and how we can utilize intelligence to better manage trials by improving site selection and creating efficiencies. The PeopleWith technology has been built in order to create this end-to-end solution. So where you need the intelligence and how you use that intelligence will then start to create this feedback loop so that you can continuously inform future trials. For example, if we go back to this phase, if a phase 2 trial has a cohort of patients now that are going through the phase 2 trial, as their disease progresses, they then become the same patient groups or the same population of patients that are going to be suitable for the recruitment of phase 3 trials if we can manage them more effectively and keep a longitudinal data set building, a patient registry to enable you to actually inform the future trials, site intelligence, and patient recruitment. And that's what today's about, guys. It's about how do we use this patient-generated health data to create efficiencies in this process. The learning objectives from today's webinar is going to be quite simple. So after listening to this today, you, the participant, will be able to explain the value presented by accessing the right patient-generated health data, and we'll show you what that looks like and how that can be utilized across sites to inform your site selection, your trial design, and then to support the efficient management of patient recruitment. This is all about reducing the time frame between your first patient first visit and your last patient first visit, and I'll show you why we need to be able to do that. Patient recruitment is challenging, folks. We know that. On the last stats that I had seen to this, 1/3 of all trials recruit participants as planned. That's the positive side. So 33% of them are doing it right. What are they doing and how are they doing that? But 66% are still failing to recruit, which is leading to increased costs, delayed access to new treatments. And one of the reasons to this is that a lot of companies out there are utilizing the electronic health records. So they're buying electronic health record data sets against sites in order to inform their site selection. But people have got to realize that national electronic health record systems are not as common as what people think. In fact, the World Health Organization member state survey recently highlighted that around about 45% of the sites actually have a national EHR structure in place. The other big question is, this data is not standardized. So data from one site in one country is going to be in a different format to the intelligence and the EHR captured in another country. And as there's no standardization, it creates a real complex challenge for companies to select the right sites in order to support the recruitment of patients. There's also large question marks over the accuracy of electronic health records, because electronic health records are captured when the patient is in front of the clinician. With the pandemic, a lot of patients haven't been in front of clinicians in the last 2 years, and their condition may have progressed beyond the criteria that's presented within a clinical trial environment. As to that, and with respect to the electronic health records, these are some of the trends that are evident through clinical trials whenever it comes to, first of all, the site selection, but then secondly, the recruitment of the patient. And what we see is, in the majority, the recruitment trend looks like this, where you've got a splurge of recruitment at the start, you've intermittent recruitment throughout the time scale, and then you've another scale of recruitment at the finish. What this leads to is an extended time frame for the first patient first visit to the last patient first visit. Site 2 is another reflection of the trend line in Site 3, where sites have been selected, but the recruitment never mirrors what the company actually thought was to the patient population. Utopia looks like this. If we have a better understanding of the sites, if we have a better understanding of the cohorts of patients within these sites and the progression of their health in real time, which can be generated through patient-generated healthcare data and the PeopleWith technology, what you will get is a steady state of recruitment throughout the entire trial. But as you're getting a steady state of recruitment, you're reducing the time frame as in 2, the first patient first visit, last patient first visit, to create a massive efficiency for the brand to get through the trial landscape faster and reduce the R&D time scale from 10 to 12 years to around about 8 to 10 years. The patient onboarding process within PeopleWith is quite simple. We utilize channels of our clients. So for example, if we're going into a pharmaceutical company who's looking to manage a new brand into a R&D environment to support the recruitment of patients, we will collaborate with their established networks. They may have a relationship with a CRO who has already got access to a number of sites, or we will utilize the sponsor sites in order to do that, and I'll show you what that looks like. We can also go direct to consumers of the brand through other consented communication pathways that are already evident within either the CRO or the sponsor. And just to let people know, whenever you talk about academics, professors working in the R&D of medications within sites, these guys all wear 2 hats. One of their hats being R&D, and the other hat being that they are still working with their teams in clinical environments where they're managing patients every single day. And by introducing them to a process where they can onboard the patient within that site, they then become more suitable to work with your brand as a result of them having greater access to the granular detail as into the progression of health. The 2 other channels, obviously, we are building data sets day and daily with patients coming onto our technology that enables us to interrogate for suitability to criteria. And then we can introduce these patients to clinical trials and support the recruitment. and also utilize that knowledge to know what site suitability access they have. And also we work with partners, and in the UK market, for example, we have a collaborative agreement with EMIS Healthcare, which enables us to access their database of patients to introduce them to clinical trials. Let's show you what the data looks like. Whenever a patient is introduced, they get a configured application, which enables them then to actually come on to a technology and capture all of the necessary detail around their medications, around their symptoms, around their diagnosis. And they do this by accessing either the QR code that's presented to them to come on to a customized layer for that therapeutic condition, or alternatively, they can access it through the introduction of a sign-up code. The site intelligence looks like this when captured properly. So I'm giving you a reflection of sites across the UK. So for the interests of this presentation today, we've brought in a number of therapeutic conditions, and the reason being is because we want to maintain the anonymity with the projects that we're working to in the interests of, obviously, non-disclosure. With respect to this, there's 140 patients across 4 sites in the UK. Now, there's multiple more sites, guys. However, we're just going to show you how this looks down to 4, and you can build out what that's going to look like in your head whenever you talk to multiple sites. If we drill into this and interrogate this data, we can show how many patients are sitting within the Belfast City Hospital who are engaging with the technology with respect to a therapeutic condition. Looking at multiple sites, the Queen Elizabeth, looking at Royal Hallamshire, or alternatively, the Manchester Royal Infirmary. So out of that population of 140 patients, when you interrogate this as into the demographic and to the criteria that's required for either real-world evidence projects or alternatively for clinical trials, you can now go into the depth of intelligence to understand the gender breakdown, the ethnicity, the age. Does these patients suffer from a single condition, or have they a comorbid presentation, and does that include or exclude them? But being able to interrogate this data in real time and that granular access to information to understand the sites will enable you to support the patient to engage in projects, either from an R&D or a real world evidence project plan. One of the big things that we need to show you here as well is, whilst you capture this intelligence, there'll be gaps highlighted in the intelligence, and we'll be able to show you the process as into utilizing the PeopleWith technology to bridge those gaps in intelligence. So if I look at the Manchester Royal Infirmary, for example, this, out of this 33 patients, this gives you the percentage split across all of the age groups, the gender breakdown, the ethnic presentation of who is actually impaired by this condition. And the big thing for us, whenever you're looking to clinical trials and real world evidence, it's being able to show how your product can work across a patient with a single diagnosis or a comorbid diagnosis. In this case, out of these 33 patients, 62, approximately 2/3 of the patients have a single diagnosis. If you want to go into more depth of detail, as into, for example, the female population, by selecting the female population in the dashboard, it automatically gives you the breakdown of the age range of them patients, the ethnic background of these patients, but more significantly, whenever you go to this level, you now see that only 37% of the patients in the female population actually have a single diagnosis. So if you're looking to actually find out what's happening in the patient and what patient numbers meet a particular criteria, you can go into the broad set of data initially, highlight the criteria, and it automatically picks you out the numbers and then shows you what sites have the right numbers of patients, which are going to create the efficiencies in site selection. Interrogating that data further, you can go in to look at the diagnosis presentation. And I'm just going to stay with the Royal Infirmary in Manchester here, but it gives you a reflection of the diagnosis and the comorbid presentation. This isn't a live dashboard, but if I was utilizing this as a live dashboard, I can start to pre-select a number of symptoms and then look to see what profile of patient is actually being impaired with them specific symptoms. One of the big things with respect to the people with technology is we are a patient support resource, which makes it quite attractive for a patient to actually onboard, because they're looking to access intelligence as into awareness on products, awareness of condition, and educate themselves. What we can show through the people with technology is, whilst we put information into the system that can be accessed by the patient, we can look to see when patients are engaging with this actual collateral. One of the things that I would indicate is that whenever you look at the collateral and when it's accessed and the time of day it's accessed, what we see is that a lot of patients, when they're impaired with maybe a symptom or an exacerbation of their symptoms at night, this is when they're actually able to access this information in real time, which creates a real value for the patient. We can break that down into Belfast and look to see how that reflects differently across the two populations, the Queen Elizabeth or the Royal Hallamshire, to see where the uniformity sits across the symptom presentations, diagnosis, age, race, ethnicity, so on and so forth. One of the big values of the people with technology and why people engage with this is evident in the next metric that I'm going to show you. 140 patients have captured around about 150,000 symptom updates as into the progression of their health. How is my headache today in comparison to yesterday? Is it better? Is it gone? When they get exacerbations of their symptoms, the depth of intelligence that's been captured around what has triggered that is enabling the patient to better understand what is causing their symptoms to become more apparent and more impairing. One of the big things that we look to whenever we're interrogating this data is looking at specific symptom profiles, Alan. So what we do is we look at maybe headaches or fatigue in the number of patients that are impaired. What we have noted is that there's a high percentage of symptom tracking with respect to neurological symptoms, with respect to mood, with respect to anxiety, with respect to stress, with respect to, your symptom could be breathlessness, which fits under the respiratory model or classification. However, what we're seeing is that there's a high percentage of our users are actually showing that whilst they are suffering from conditions, a lot of the classification of symptoms is sitting under the neurological classification. This can be looked at every single site. And where we see this creating the most value is because once you've created all of this site intelligence, so giving you an example, there's 125,000 sites across the globe, across 120 countries that are being currently utilized for R&D by all of the companies. Now, not all of the companies are working with all of the sites. Not all of the CROs are working across all of the sites. But whenever you talk to the efficiencies, one of the efficiencies that can be captured as a result of having built a patient registry before your site selection, before you've actually onboarded and recruited patients, you have a deeper awareness and a deeper insight as into the symptom presentation of patients before you bring them into a trial or alternatively a real world evidence project. When patients come into trials at day 0, they can go into one of 2 arms in the majority, which either is an active treatment arm or a placebo arm. Once these patients are on the technology and engaging with the technology, and you've got a good reflection of their symptoms pre-trial, when they go on to active treatment, you now can see what the presentation of symptoms are post-trial. This leads to an accuracy of adverse event reporting because, in all honesty, folks, symptoms post-trial minus symptoms pre-trial is what an adverse event is. If a patient is suffering from symptoms pre-trial and they're not captured through the normal process that's currently being utilized, which is maybe an interview with a clinician with a predefined interview set, you may not capture that detail of symptom that that patient previously suffered from. If that is not captured in the current model that there's been applied in clinical trials, and that symptom then is then presented post-trial, that then would be regarded as an adverse event. If there's information that is missing whenever you look through your site intelligence, the PeopleWith platform and the technology enables you then to directly communicate with the patients who are on the system. So when you're capturing information against patients, obviously there's a consent layer, but we can then position prompts, questionnaires, prems, experiences, and so on and so forth to bridge the gap of intelligence that enables you as a company to better understand what's happening in the patient in the real world. Looking at medications, and I'm not going to go through this, but just to be able to show you that whenever you start interrogating the medications that these patients are on, you can actually then start to see what patients are on what medications for particular diagnosis. So for example, in this circumstance, out of the 140 patients, whenever you select pericarditis, you can see that there's 10 patients that meet that criteria, and then you can start to see what their polypharmacy or single treatment plan that these patients are on, so that whenever you're actually looking for suitability of trial, you can see if these are the appropriate patients for the trial and into what site they're positioned. One of the big things that the patients requested from us whenever we were developing this technology was they wanted to also track their supplements. First of all, to remind them to take them, but more significantly, they wanted to see if the supplements that they were taking were having a desired effect. This enabled us to be able to present back that in this circumstance, out of the 140 patients, 46 of them, so approximately 30% of them, are also taking supplements for their condition. And you can look to see how that pans out across all of the different sites. One of the other big things is the vital measurements, and with the home devices and wearables now, we can bring all of that intelligence in to help patients to understand if their treatment plans are being effective or not. Because whenever you are being offered a treatment plan, there's 2 parts to this in order to determine if you're getting an outcome. Patients either present with symptoms or they have vital measurements that are not within the normal range. It can be a combination of both. But whenever you provide patients with an awareness of what they have to monitor and how they do so, and they engage with the technology, they then start to see how this is actually affecting their health in a positive manner or not, to enable them then to take the right information back to their doctor, or alternatively, it gives them that motivation to change their behaviors and become more adherent to their treatments. Just to give you an example of what this looks like, we're just going to show you how in this circumstance, these patients were tracking their blood pressure. You can see the inputs, and that can all be charted for the patient, and it's enabled for them to share with their clinician in real time. So going back to the point of this webinar, it's all about having access to PGHD, patient-generated health data in real time, to support the selection of the site to create this as an outcome. And we have now shown on a number of projects how we have supported patients and supported clinicians to better understand the progression of health, but also their suitability with respect to the criteria that's set for patient selection for clinical trials or alternatively real-world evidence. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak here today with you, Alan. I'll take any questions at this point, if any has come through, or if you have any questions yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. That's absolutely fascinating, and I know obviously trial recruitment is an ongoing challenge, but not just the recruitment. Actually getting high quality information back from people in trials can be challenging as well. That have come through, 2 or 3. One question saying, basically, when a trial is set up and patients are recruited, everyone is automatically given the app. Is that the case?
Well, there's 2 ways to look at this. In some cases, the patient may already be on the application because you're aware of them patients within the trial sites. So there could be a number of patients that are currently using the application, but whenever you introduce them to the trial, you have to introduce them to the consent process for them to be incorporated in the trial. So they don't come off the app, they just then continue using it, but then you can frame out what is the project needs, and then you can reposition what required information needs to go to that patient with respect to keeping them informed as into the trial and to support their experiences. Those patients within trials who are not on the application, who just come in from a clinical environment, and a consultant, for example, or one of his teams who are working on the R&D process in a clinical environment, they find a patient who could potentially meet the criteria. At that point in time, they can then introduce them to the application to enable them to track their health for a few weeks prior to them actually being consented into the trial, to ensure that they are suitable and meet the criteria of the trial.
Okay, cool. Okay, the next question, they're actually all linked, Mark. I'll just try and put them in kind of, I suppose, a logical order. What training do you actually provide for both healthcare professionals and for the patients in the effective and efficient use of the app?
Well, all of the training is embedded in the actual technology. So if it comes to the usage of the functionality, there's a search mechanism within the platform that allows them to immediately access how to do things within the application. One of the big things that has been highlighted to us through our patient focus groups is the intuitive interface of the technology and its ease of understanding. What we have done, Alan, is we've kept this as simple as possible to ensure that there's no complexity as into the information capture and how the patient utilizes this to do this. And I'm sorry I haven't got this at hand at the minute, but what we're seeing now with the patients that have been introduced to this technology, their average session per day is around about 1 minute 32 seconds. So it doesn't take up much time to actually use the technology and efficiently input information. That's the first thing. Mm-hmm. Second thing is, what we're seeing is that 72.8% of people that have been introduced to this health application, the PeopleWith application, are actually engaging with the application per day. So there's 72.8% sessions, active sessions daily across our user base of this technology, which is indicative of the ease of use and the lack of complexity presented in the application as into the capture of the right intelligence.
Okay, thank you. you've kind of you've kind of answered the question slightly already, but someone's asked, what education for patients is actually included within the app?
Well, if it's just an organic patient, as in a patient has just been introduced to the app themselves, as because you can find this app on the App Store and it's free to use for the patient, or alternatively, they find it on Google Play if it's an Android device. But with respect to the education, we have linked through education on every single condition. So if you go in for diabetes, you'll get, and you've selected diabetes as your diagnosis, the information that is going to be presented to you will be particularly framed towards you for that condition. When we get involved in projects, so for example, you're coming in from a clinical trial environment, we sit down with that company initially and we speak with them as into what information do you want the patient to have. And what we try to support the company with is to understand that there's a variance or a diversity of medical literacy. So you've got to present information so that it's readily understood by all patients of all levels of medical literacy. The other thing that we have done with respect to the platform and on the direction of the patient is that there's some people prefer video, some people prefer audio, some people prefer a written word, and we give them options to select their preferences so that whenever they go to access intelligence, that intelligence is formatted in the right process for them to best understand the intelligence that's been presented to them. Okay,
that's really useful. That's great. Final two questions that have come through. Again, very much linked to the app. In the work that you've done so far, what has patient compliance been like in relation to the effective use of the app and the effective recording of their symptoms?
Right. Well, I highlighted that already with respect, but I'll go over it again. But we have 72.8% active sessions from our users of this mHealth app, the PeopleWith technology. So that's a high percentage of patients that are having active sessions per day. One of the things that we do that enables us to support compliance to the application is that we have involved the patient throughout the development phase of this technology. So we have set up multiple patient focus groups where patients have come in and they have give off their experiences and give off their wishes and requests for functionality that they require. And what we've done is we have taken that direction. And just to give you an example of the value that we have created, one of our first instances of the product, I think we had 236 patients with asthma were tracking their health on a day-to-day basis. And over a 3-month period, there was around about 17,000 symptom updates. Now, we spoke with a lot of these patients because we thought to ourselves, in 3 months, 17,000, it's not really a lot. They're not using it as much as they should use it. They could be using it a little bit more. Why are they not using it? So we sat with them and they gave us a bit of direction as to how we could make that more efficient for them. So we created a single access point on notifications so that they could update their symptoms with one push of a button, update all of their symptoms rather than getting into update symptoms individually. And even just by bringing in that simple process, on the last count with, for example, them 140 patients with respect to that site intelligence project we've just shown you, there was approximately 150,000 symptom updates in a shorter time frame. So compliance with the technology is very good as a result of the directive piece that we have taken from the user group to give them a device that fits their needs. And another thing as well, Alan, what we're hearing a lot, there's around about 56% of our users have a comorbid presentation. And the feedback that we're getting from these users as to why they like this platform beyond any other that they've used is because they've got a single point of entry for all of their PGHD, patient-generated health data. So if they have a comorbid population, they probably would have had to download multiple apps in order to track across all of their conditions. Whereas one of the USPs of this platform is that it's condition agnostic, and that you can capture multiple comorbid presentations on a single platform, and you can integrate all of the information that you're capturing on wearables, either through passive or through manual entry.
Okay, that sounds excellent. Final question that's come through, Mark, is what about the elderly?
Well,
elderly use of technology.
Yeah. So
what it's linked, but what have you found so far in terms of the app use in elderly patients?
Well,
and what's been done to support them?
Right. So in a lot of cases, elderly people have carers if they have an impairment of a condition. And what we are seeing is that the carers are actually capturing this information on their behalf. And, you know, just because you're elderly doesn't mean you can't, like, there's a lot of elderly people out there using Facebook. There's a lot of elderly people out there using other mediums like Instagram, and they're, you know, just because they're older doesn't mean that they can't use technology. And we are seeing that there's a high percentage of our usage is above the age of 70, because in a lot of cases, they're the population that's impaired with these conditions. But where patients of this age are actually using this to their advantage as well, whenever they actually download this or their carers capture this information, whenever they actually need to maybe present this information to their doctor, they can do so remotely by creating a health report from the platform that they can send directly to their doctor, that enables the doctor maybe to make decisions with respect to their health without effectively having to come out and see them. And we're seeing more and more of the population using it over that age group. And whenever we put out questionnaires, and there's a lot of information being captured in this device with respect to quality of life, and whenever they're building out questionnaire information and they have to populate it, in order for them to do so, they have to consent to use the questionnaire. And whenever they're consenting to use the questionnaire, we're increasingly seeing that it's carers or family members who are actually capturing that information for the elderly population. Like, I care about my parents. There's a lot of people out there care about their parents, their grandparents, their aunts and their uncles that are willing to do this on their behalf to support the deeper understanding of their health progress so that their family member can get better health outcomes. Okay, that sounds fantastic. Mark, we're fast approaching end of the webinar. The time's nearly up. If people have further questions or they would request perhaps a demonstration, how do they get in contact? I know you've put the contact slide up already, but how would they get in contact with you to find out more? Well, it's quite simple. Like, we're easily accessed through our website, so you can access through the PeopleWith website. You can get in contact with us that way. You can contact through my email address, and like we will speak with anyone and support anyone who has a challenge in this position. They may not want to use our technology, that's fine. But if we can help them to better manage their patients, well, then we would be willing to support them to do so. Well, that's a great offer, Mark. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure this has been a fascinating presentation, and obviously a real advancement in relation to, you know, clinical trial data and the outcomes that you can get from clinical trials. So I wish you every success with PeopleWith, and as a result of this webinar, hopefully you get a good few requests for more information for demonstrations. So thank you once again, Mark. Have you any final closing comments? No, thank you, Alan, for inviting me in to speak today and to present the values that can be created. And just to say that today was specifically around site intelligence, patient registries, building of patient registries, and better understanding the patient profile and presentation of conditions to optimize the efficiency of patient recruitment. That's only one aspect. Obviously, there's so much more can be delivered with this platform with respect to patient support, enhancing patient engagement for companies who have brands in commercial environments. But look, we're open to working with anybody. Our core ethos is all about helping patients get better outcomes. And if that needs to be creating efficiencies in clinical trials, or helping patients to better engage with their health so that they get better outcomes, or helping them to engage with their health so doctors can understand the progression of health, that's central to the business. And if we can do more to help people get better outcomes, that's what we'll be doing.
Fantastic, Mark. That's great. And thank you once again.
Appreciate that. Thank you.